Every day, large container ships like the 90,000-ton MSC Lucy arrive at Qatar's new megaport. The first of 3 terminals here was officially launched in September, but Hamad Port has been a hive of activity ever since the Saudi-led blockade of the country began back in June.
Just before the blockade, we were talking about around, especially if we talk about the container terminals, about 40 to 45,000 TEUs per month. But since the blockade, our running of the operation is increased to reach 115,000. So almost you are talking about a double.
Until recently, cargo destined for Qatar was unloaded at ports in the United Arab Emirates and brought in on smaller vessels. But with the new port now functional, even the world's biggest ships can dock here, and that's slashing the cost of imports.
Previously, if you bring cargo from, let's say, from China, from Far East to the State, on that time that took times almost between 30 to 40 days. So since the blockade, and then we opened direct call from China, from Far East to the State, now we are talking about only 20 to 21 days.
With so much more land and sea still available, authorities here want to boost tourism. So they're building a maritime museum, an aquarium, and hotels. And they're building silos, warehouses, and even packaging plants to ensure that Qatar keeps moving towards its National Vision 2030. The port is a key component of Qatar's drive to boost domestic industry and diversify the economy. So it's spending a lot of money to quickly build the remainder of this 28 square kilometer project. It's put aside $25 billion in next year's budget for this and other infrastructure projects. In all, the government plans to spend $56 billion next year, 2.4% more than its expenditure in 2017. The state's revenues have taken a hit because of low oil and gas prices, and it expects to run a deficit of $7.6 billion. Doha isn't just doling out cash for ports, roads, and stadiums. A large portion of funds have also been set aside for new schools and for new businesses in the services sector.
We support different types of businesses in different sectors through providing seed funding, incubation space like office spaces, coaching and mentoring, and access to a network that would support the startups moving forward. And we also fill the main element of our national vision, which is creating the knowledge-based economy.
The government expects its efforts combined with those of the private sector will grow the economy between 2.5 and 3% next year. More importantly, it hopes to ensure the country keeps moving away from its dependency on hydrocarbons. Mobin, Nasir, TRT World, Doha.
Back from Qatar, and joining me now on set is our senior business producer, Mobin Nasir. Thanks so much for joining us, Mobin. Now, it seems that the blockade isn't working, and that is actually making Qatar thrive. Is that what's happening?
Well, there's at least a few reasons for that. First of all, let's see. Qatar did depend on Saudi Arabia and on the Emirates to bring in a lot of the products, especially fresh produce, consumer goods, things of that nature. But of course, it's been able to substitute those very quickly. Part of the reason we're told by officials there is that they've been preparing for a similar situation for years now. And of course, they were able to respond very quickly with the help of Turkey, Iran, and a few other countries. Besides that, it's also not very economically dependent on its neighbors beyond this. There isn't a lot of industry to start off with on either side that would be depending on each other for raw materials. And then, of course, there's the money. Keep in mind, there has been an impact. Just the fact that Qatar's been able to bounce back quickly doesn't mean there was no impact. They did lose about $10 to $12 billion since the blockade began, of course, in sourcing from different countries. They've been able to stabilize that very quickly, and we've seen industrial output rebounding. So it wouldn't be fair to say that there was no impact, but yes, they have bounced back very quickly.
But there must be something that's really hurting them, because this is now their third consecutive deficit. So, you know, what's hurting them so much?
Well, precisely. There are a few things going on. First of all, they're spending a lot more. Of course, there's the upcoming World Cup. Some estimates at the beginning of this year said they were spending as much as $500 million per week on World Cup-related projects. Of course, that's slowed down considerably, that spending, as many of those mega projects come online. Secondly, there isn't as much money coming through. Keep in mind, oil prices, gas prices are lower than they've been for a very long time. And of course, that means less money coming in, hence the deficit.
Okay. Now, talk to me about the vision 2030 that lots of these Gulf countries have. How does Qatar's national Vision 2030 compare to Saudi's Vision 2030?
Well, I think if you just go by the names, there's a lot of similarities there, right? Look, those are different economies. Saudi Arabia is much larger. The population is above 30 million as compared to Qatar's indigenous population of just around 300,000 people. Saudi has issues that Qatar might not have to the same extent: unemployment, lack of education or poverty. Having said that, they are all trying to achieve something very similar. Saudi Arabia's plan entails moving away from hydrocarbons, as does Qatar's. The areas they want to go into, Saudi is developing Riyadh Financial District, which they're hoping will be the financial hub of the region. Well, Dubai already exists, and Qatar is trying to do something similar with Doha. Similarly, on the logistics front, we just saw in the report there the Hamad port being developed. Of course, the entire project is much bigger than Qatar needs, at least for the next few years. So the whole idea behind developing it was to connect not just Qatar, but the entire region.
Okay.
Of course, if the blockade remains, what do they do with that excess capacity?
Let's see exactly what they'll do with that. Thanks so much, Mobin.